Sorry. Hey folks, Dustin DePirac, Indiana beat writer here with got two IDS kids, Greg Rosenstein and Nathan Hart. I brought them on because I determined after the Penn State game that I'm really boring when I'm doing this by myself, so I need other people to help entertain you guys. Anyway, Indiana loses 88-76 tonight in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Cut it back to 1 point and pretty much fell apart down the stretch. More or less gave up a 13-1 run that pretty much blew that lead up, guys. I mean, what do you think we saw tonight? This was the first time that Indiana's really seen a power conference team, first time they've had to go on the road. Just what were kind of your impressions of them really, for the first time, getting the test this year?
Initial reaction, first half, you're thinking, oh, these are all the warning signs that you've seen in the first 6 games. They're coming to fruition. You know, the slow starts, you're thinking, oh, there's slow starts against the first 6 games. In the first 6 games, the teams can, IU can easily come back. They're playing weak teams. Against Boston's schedule, a slow start, you assume Boston College is just going to take this away. You know, the rebounding, the second chance points that Tom Crean was talking about after the game, those are sorts of things that were coming out in the first half. A lot of talk in the first 6 games about IU's defense, holding teams to 55 points a game. Boston College scores, I think, 43 points in the first half.
Right.
You start to get worried just from the first half.
Right, and you just the second half, it showed a lot about the team because they were down 14 at half and they were able to, cut it to 1 point. There were issues though because every time they got a big basket, they gave up another one on the other end. I mean, Crean said after the game there are 2 things which were the biggest issues, which was on-ball defense and rebounding. Clearly that was an issue in the first half. You would see Boston College just rip the ball out of guys like Pritchard's hands. There were a lot of second half points. I think 21 second chance points, 21 second chance points by Boston College. I mean, that's a big difference in a game like this.
This was the sort of game that last year they played major conference teams in their 3rd games. They went down to Puerto Rico, played Ole Miss, and then a couple of really good mid-majors in George Mason and Boston University. And it clearly served as a wake-up call, especially for guys like Christian Watford and Derek Elston, freshman forwards who would not face that kind of physicality. This is kind of the same situation where it's the first time that they're playing a really, really physical team. Did you guys get the impression that they got used to it throughout the game? Because it did seem like they rebounded a little bit better in the second half. They were obviously blown away from the boards in the first half. And do you think this is something that helps them moving forward, maybe?
On the rebounding end, it was difficult. I think between the 4 IU big guys, Watford, Elston, Capobianco, and Pritchard, they combined for 8 boards the entire game. You know, that should be what one player gets in a game, 8 boards. And so I don't know if they really improved, and that was obviously something Crean talked about after the game. Watford, he had 2 boards. I know he scored 23 points, but a guy like Watford, he needs to be an inside presence, and Boston College just roughed him up. It's kind of like the Ferris State player, Justin Keenan, doing the same sort of thing. When you get a good big man like Boston College had, like Ferris State had, IU has struggled.
And this is kind of a big deal. I mean, this is showing that losing Guy for the year is going to be a big deal because of depth. You got Pritchard, Elston, and I mean those in Capobianco. I mean those guys, are not going to be as physical as someone like Guy would be. And then those are really your only main low post guys. And then you have Watford, like Nathan said, who maybe should have done better rebounding, but he was moved to the 3 because that they want him more on the perimeter and everything. So I mean, I think when you switch Watford to the 3, he's not going to be able to get those numbers. But I mean, it shows that they're really lacking in depth. When you don't have a guy like Guy out there also.
Right. I think part of the issue with Watford had too is they played a lot of zone in the second half. They went to a 2-3 really early, kind of threw Boston College off of their rhythm. And I guess surprisingly, what they have done with Watford in a 2-3 zone is they put him out on top of it. It's been guys like him and Oladipo will be out front to use that sort of length and maybe get some steals that way. It's an interesting direction because in most cases you're putting 2 guards out on the end there, but they've kind of switched it up, and it did serve a purpose. It seemed like, I know Watford had at least 1 steal when he just sort of swarmed over top of a guy, kind of beyond the 3-point line and just sort of stole the ball off of him. So that's part of it. But again, 2 rebounds is not what they want from Christian Watford. He's been their leading rebounder all of last year. He's still got to be the guy that does that. If you're not going to get all that much rebounding from Elston or Pritchard or Capobianco, you got to get those. I mean, and also what Crean pointed out a few times is it was 50-50 balls. It was not even so much, balls that were just up on the rim and somebody had to out-jump somebody or box somebody out. It was, balls that got, closer to the foul line and something like that where everybody kind of had a shot at it and it just kept seeming to go Boston College's way. I mean, those were kind of a lot of those rebounds that just ended up going that way. And I think, Boston College got second chances, I think more even than Indiana got stops. So that's another issue is, I think they both had equal amount of offensive rebounds, but Boston College had more offensive rebounds. Indiana had defensive rebounds. So they could not. They had a hard. They stopped them less than they allowed second chances.
And we could talk.
So-
I mean, we could talk rebounding all day. I mean, that was obviously the main issue tonight.
Right.
Second chance points on that. But I mean, I think they also just faced a good offensive team. You got a guy like Reggie Jackson who was very good. I mean, inside and outside.
Yeah.
I mean, as Verdell said after the game, I mean, when he had a smaller guard on him, he took him to the hole. And then when he had a bigger guy, he was able to, shoot from the perimeter, and he made a lot of those shots. And they also had, Biko Parrish made a lot of good shots. I mean, they shot 50% in both halves. I mean, was IU playing good defense? No. But, I mean, it was a good shooting team.
Reggie Jackson's going to be one of those names you're going to hear a lot more. I mean, it's a name that kind of has started being thrown around. Recently, he had a really good Old Spice Classic, helped the Eagles to 2 wins out there. And the guy's just getting rave reviews. I mean, Tom Crean said he might be one of the toughest players he's seen in 3 years at Indiana. It's probably by far the toughest matchup they've seen so far. I mean, he drove the ball extremely well. They run a lot of ball screens at the top of the key that he comes off of, and scored a lot of points that way, just kind of driving off the big man and just scoring over him. I mean, he did a lot of that, was able to hit from outside, has a great inside-outside game, 6'3", 208-pound kid, just excellent athlete, really strong guy. We were talking, Bob Ryan was actually here from the Boston Globe today, and he was actually hanging out in Indiana's press conference and just raved about how much better of a player Jackson is than any other Boston College perimeter player that he's seen here. And obviously he's been around a long time. He's seen some NBA guys, come out of here. And he pretty much said that Jackson is the most athletic, maybe the most impressive guard he's seen come out of Boston College. So that guy is going to be something else. He scored 27 points in the Hoosiers tonight.
Just another interesting thing talking about Bob Ryan. He mentioned that this game, and we watch a lot of IU basketball, but he said this was just a fun game to watch, which maybe you haven't heard from IU games in the past 2 years, is that they're putting a product on the court that's watchable. And it was a good competitive game, 88-76, ACC Big Ten Challenge. This is what you want, and that's our challenge.
And they pretty much haven't faced any real competition so far. So to get this 1 week until a game like Kentucky, once the Big Ten season comes around, I think it's really important to get a game like this in.
Now, what does this show? Again, this is still, as much as we're kind of giving credit to Boston College, it's still a team that was 15-16 last year. Obviously, it looks like there's some improvement under Steve Donahue, but this is not a team that's, it might be very good, but I don't know if it's a team that runs away with the ACC, and they did beat Indiana by 12 tonight. So they go forward, they get Kentucky, they've got probably 2 decent games against, in Vegas at the end of the month, and then it's, Big Ten season. What does this show you about what this team can be when it does actually play major conference competition?
Well, we've hammered home on rebounding with the big guys, but I think another thing with the big guys is just offensive production. Not that you want Pritchard and Cup, you don't need those guys to be scoring double digits every game, but they're scoring like 2-4 points a game, and that's not going to work in the Big Ten. And you got good Big Ten big men. You got Tisdale, Johnson. Obviously, we know all those types of guys are coming in. And if the big men from Ferris State and the big men from Boston College can beat them up physically, offensively, and defensively, that's a big concern going forward.
And a lot of times you would see a guy like Pritchard, and obviously you're not counting on him to be the man offensively, and it's a guard-oriented system here, but I mean, a lot of times he'd get the ball and he would just automatically pass back. He wouldn't even look to drive or take it on somebody. I mean, he only took 1 shot in this game. So I mean, this was brought up in the press conference after. He needs to take it, to the rim more, and the big guys just need to be more productive offensively.
I think that's another thing that comes back with Guy. I mean, I think going into this year, you kind of looked at Pritchard and Capobianco and said, okay, they can just be those guys that get you a couple points, a couple rebounds a game now. You can have at least a 5 guy who will, take up most of those minutes, who can do some scoring, do some rebounding. Again, I mean, he wasn't the second coming of Hakeem Olajuwon here, but he was at least going to add, significant points, significant rebounds that you weren't necessarily going to expect a ton out of those 2 guys. Now it's back to the situation again where you need something out of Pritchard and Capobianco. Like, going forward that's going to happen. At least until yesterday, you thought there was a chance that Guy might play again, and all of a sudden now you're looking at those are your centers for the second year in a row. And Elston is obviously bulked up enough that he can play that 5, but he's obviously more comfortable on the floor. So now you need those 3 guys to give you something now, because you know that Guy's not coming back. So, well, all right, guys. Saturday they play against Savannah State. They go back to playing the sort of transitional Division I teams. But then a week from then, is next week finals week? You guys know this.
Dead week and then finals.
Dead week and then finals week. So then they get a week off and then Kentucky, then a week off, and then they start that Vegas Classic. So they're getting rolling here, and they're starting to play some teams that you guys have actually heard of. So keep with us. Check out the scoop. We'll have live chats and all that kind of stuff, and of course keep following the saga that is the Indiana football coaching search. So stick with us. Thanks a lot.